My name is Lydia. I'm 58 years old, and I never imagined I would end up homeless after my only son died. At his funeral, my daughter-in-law Amanda looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Don't be dramatic. Pack your bags and learn to survive." 2 weeks later, I was sleeping in my car, with nothing but memories and tears. Then my son's lawyer called with news that changed everything. A secret trust worth $8 million. Where are you watching from today? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe and like this video. Life can change in an instant, and my story might just prepare you for the unexpected turns ahead. My life before the tragedy was peaceful and content. After teaching art at Boston East High School for 30 years, I had settled into a comfortable retirement. My husband Frank had passed away 5 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving a hollow space in my life that could never be filled. But I still had Michael, our only son, who had grown into a wonderful man any mother would be proud of. Michael had followed his own path and become a successful real estate developer. He had his father's business sense and my creative eye, a combination that served him well as he built his company from the ground up. Every Sunday, he would drive over to our family home, the one Frank had built with his own hands, and we would have dinner together. Those were precious hours I cherished. "Mom, you need to update those curtains," Michael would tease, pointing to the floral patterns Frank had always complained about. "Dad is probably rolling in his grave seeing those are still hanging." "Your father secretly loved these curtains," I would reply, and we would both laugh, sharing memories of Frank that kept him alive in our hearts. When Michael met Amanda at a charity gala 6 years ago, I was cautiously optimistic. She was beautiful, smart, and seemed to adore my son. I remember the day he brought her home to meet me. "Mom, this is Amanda," Michael said, his eyes shining with that look I recognized, the same look his father had when we first met. Amanda was polished and charming that day, complimenting my home and asking thoughtful questions about the family photos displayed on the mantel. "You must be so proud of Michael," she said, placing her hand on his arm possessively. "Every single day," I replied, meaning it with all my heart. Their wedding 2 years later was lavish, more extravagant than I would have chosen, but Amanda had specific ideas about how everything should be. Michael seemed happy to give her whatever she wanted. I gave a toast at their reception, my voice trembling slightly as I welcomed Amanda to our family. "Frank would have loved to be here today," I said, raising my glass. "But I know he's watching and blessing this union. To Michael and Amanda, may your life together be filled with the same love and laughter that Frank and I shared." After they married, our Sunday dinners continued, though less frequently, as Michael's business grew. Amanda rarely joined us, always citing some social engagement or charity event she couldn't miss. When she did come, she would glance around my home with barely concealed disdain, as if mentally redesigning everything. "You should sell this place, Lydia," she suggested once. "It's too big for just you, and the maintenance must be overwhelming." "This house is filled with memories," I explained. "Every corner holds a piece of our family history." Michael quickly changed the subject, sensing my discomfort. Later, when Amanda was making a phone call outside, he squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about the house, Mom. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." What I didn't realize then was how Amanda's subtle comments were the first warning signs of her true character. Michael was generous with me, helping with house repairs and making sure I was financially comfortable after retirement. He had set up a monthly allowance for me, insisting that I use it to enjoy my retirement years. "You and Dad sacrificed so much for me," he would say. "Let me do this for you." I used part of that money to volunteer at the local community center, teaching art to underprivileged children. Finding purpose in retirement brought me joy, and Michael would often stop by to watch the children's faces light up as they created their masterpieces. 1 week before the accident, we had our last family dinner. Amanda surprisingly joined us that evening, wearing an expensive new dress and diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved. "Business must be good," I commented to Michael, nodding toward Amanda's earrings. "We're closing on the Riverside project next month," he replied, a proud smile on his face. "It's the biggest deal we've ever made." Amanda added, "Michael's been working so hard. He deserves to spoil me a little. That night after dinner, while Amanda was taking a call in the other room, Michael pulled me aside. "Mom, I've been updating some of my legal affairs," he said quietly. "I've created a trust and revised my will. I want to make sure everything is in order." "That sounds sensible," I replied, though I felt a strange chill at his words. "I've been talking to Thomas, my lawyer. He's making sure everything is protected." Michael hesitated. "Just in case anything ever happens." "Nothing is going to happen," I assured him, squeezing his hand. "You're only 35. You have your whole life ahead of you." If only I had known those would be our last meaningful words together. If only I had asked more questions about those legal documents. If only I had recognized the foreboding in his eyes. 3 days later, Michael stopped by unexpectedly while I was gardening. He looked tired with dark circles under his eyes. "Just wanted to see how you're doing, Mom," he said, helping me plant some new roses. "I'm more worried about you," I replied. "You're working too hard." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Everything will be fine, I promise." As he left, he hugged me tightly longer than usual. I remember watching his car disappear down the street, never imagining it would be the last time I would see him alive. 4 days later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my world collapsed when I received the call that Michael had been in a fatal car accident. His car had hydroplaned on the wet highway, flipping several times before coming to rest at the bottom of an embankment. By the time emergency services reached him, he was gone. The next few days passed in a blur of disbelief and heartbreak. I had already buried my husband, and now I was facing the unthinkable task of burying my child. No parent should ever have to endure such pain. Little did I know that my nightmare was just beginning, and that Amanda would soon reveal her true colors in ways I could never have imagined. The moment I received that phone call about Michael's accident, my world stopped spinning. The police officer's voice was gentle but firm as he delivered the news no mother should ever hear. "Mrs. Howard, I'm very sorry to inform you that your son Michael has been in a serious accident." My hand clutched the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Is he okay?" The pause before he answered told me everything. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He didn't survive the crash." I don't remember dropping the phone or falling to my knees. I only remember the sound that escaped from my throat, a primal wail of a mother losing her child, a sound I didn't even recognize as coming from me. Somehow I managed to call a neighbor who drove me to the hospital. The hallway to the morgue stretched before me like a tunnel with no end. When they pulled back the sheet, I couldn't believe the still form was my vibrant, loving son. His face was peaceful, but marked with small cuts from the shattered glass. I touched his cheek, still expecting him to open his eyes and tell me it was all a terrible mistake. "Oh, Michael," I whispered. "Not you too. Not so soon." Amanda arrived shortly after, her face streaked with tears. In those first hours, she seemed genuinely devastated, clinging to me as we both tried to comprehend our new reality. "I can't believe he's gone," she sobbed against my shoulder. "We just had breakfast together this morning." For that brief moment, we were united in our grief, two women who had loved the same man in different ways. I held her as she cried, thinking perhaps I had misjudged her over the years. Maybe this shared tragedy would bring us closer. That illusion lasted less than 24 hours. By the next day, as we began making funeral arrangements, I noticed a shift in Amanda's demeanor. Her grief seemed to recede behind a wall of practicality and impatience. When I suggested we bury Michael next to his father in the family plot, she dismissed the idea immediately. "That cemetery is old and out of the way," she said, scrolling through her phone. "I've been looking at Lakeside Memorial. It's much more prestigious and has better security." "But Michael always said he wanted to be near his father," I argued gently. Amanda's eyes hardened. "We never specifically discussed burial arrangements. As his wife, I think I know what he would have wanted." I was too overwhelmed by grief to fight, so Michael was laid to rest at Lakeside, far from his father. The funeral was elaborate and impersonal, filled with business associates rather than close friends. Amanda had taken control of every detail from the expensive casket to the selection of music that Michael had never particularly enjoyed. Throughout the service, I sat in the front row, clutching a photo of Michael as a child. Amanda sat beside me, but felt miles away, accepting condolences with the poise of a politician rather than a grieving widow. My brother Robert, who had flown in from Arizona, leaned close during the reception. "Is everything okay between you and Amanda?" he whispered. "She seems different." "She's grieving in her own way," I said, trying to be understanding despite my own concerns. "Maybe," Robert replied, his eyes following Amanda as she networked among Michael's business partners. "Just be careful, Lydia." In the days following the funeral, I found myself drawn to Michael's childhood bedroom in my home, which I had preserved much as it was when he left for college. Sitting on his bed surrounded by his sports trophies and high school yearbooks, I felt closer to him somehow. One afternoon, I was looking through a box of his childhood drawings when Amanda called. "Lydia, I need you to come to the house tomorrow," she said, her voice businesslike. "There are things we need to discuss about Michael's affairs." "Of course," I replied. "What time should I come?" "7 p.m. Dress appropriately. I'm having some people over." The call ended abruptly, leaving me puzzled by her formal tone. Michael and Amanda's home was a modern minimalist condo downtown, a stark contrast to our warm family home. When I arrived the next evening, I was surprised to see several cars parked outside, including one with a law firm logo on the door. Inside, I found Amanda had already packed away most photos of Michael, with the exception of one professionally taken portrait on the mantel. She was speaking with a man in an expensive suit when I entered, but broke away to greet me with an air kiss that didn't come close to my cheek. "Lydia, thank you for coming on time," she said, as if punctuality was a rare achievement for me. "We'll have dinner first, then discuss business matters." Throughout the meal, I felt increasingly uncomfortable as Amanda and her guests discussed property values and investment opportunities. No one mentioned Michael, except in terms of his business assets. It was as if my son, the person, had already been erased, replaced by balance sheets and property portfolios. After dinner, Amanda invited everyone to the living room. I noticed she had redecorated since I'd last visited just 2 weeks earlier. All traces of Michael's taste, the warm leather sofa he loved, and the abstract paintings he had selected were gone, replaced by sleek, cold furnishings that reflected Amanda's aesthetic. "How could you do this so quickly?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. "It's only been 3 weeks since—" "Life goes on, Lydia," Amanda cut me off. "Michael would want us to move forward, not wallow in the past." Her words stung like a slap. Moving forward was one thing, but erasing my son's presence so thoroughly and rapidly seemed heartless. As I stood awkwardly in the unfamiliar space that had once held pieces of my son, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Amanda was speaking quietly to her friend in the kitchen, not realizing I was just around the corner. "How much longer until everything's settled?" her friend asked. "Just a few more details to handle," Amanda replied. "Then getting rid of the old lady is next on the agenda." "You really think she'll put up a fight? She's all sentiment and no spine. It won't be a problem." I retreated silently, my heart pounding. Surely they couldn't be talking about me. But deep down, I knew they were. The cold calculation in Amanda's voice confirmed all the fears I had tried to dismiss over the years. As the evening progressed, I noticed Amanda conferring with the man in the expensive suit, occasionally glancing in my direction. Their heads bent together in conspiratorial whispers, and each time they looked my way, a sense of foreboding grew stronger in my chest. I didn't know then that this dinner was merely setting the stage for the brutal confrontation that would leave me homeless and desperate, forced to face a cruel world, without the protection of my son or the security of the home I had known for decades. Exactly 1 month after we laid Michael to rest, Amanda invited me to what she called a formal dinner to discuss Michael's estate. Her voice over the phone was polite but distant, as if she were speaking to a business acquaintance rather than family. "Please arrive at 6:30 sharp," she instructed. And Lydia, this is an important financial discussion, so please prepare yourself accordingly. I spent the afternoon trying to calm my nerves, selecting a modest black dress and the pearl necklace Frank had given me on our 25th anniversary. I wanted to honor Michael by showing the dignity and composure he had always admired in me, despite the growing unease in my stomach. When I arrived at Amanda's condo, I was surprised to find only 3 place settings at the dining table. Amanda greeted me with her now familiar air kiss and introduced me to a stern-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses. "This is Gregory Hoffman, my attorney," she said, gesturing to the man who barely cracked a smile as he shook my hand. "Your attorney?" I asked, confused. "I thought Michael's lawyer was Thomas Reynolds." "Thomas is no longer handling our affairs," Amanda replied dismissively. "Gregory better understands my current needs." Throughout dinner, the conversation remained superficial and strained. Amanda spoke about her plans to redecorate the entire condo and possibly purchase a vacation home in the Hamptons. There was no mention of Michael, no acknowledgement of the gaping hole his absence had left in our lives. After dessert was served, Amanda nodded to Gregory, who produced a folder filled with legal documents. "Now, Lydia," Amanda began, her voice suddenly taking on a patronizing tone. "I know this past month has been difficult for you, but it's time we address certain realities." Gregory cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Howard, are you aware of the changes made to your son's will, approximately 3 weeks before his unfortunate passing?" I felt a chill run through me. "Changes, no. I wasn't aware of any changes." Michael updated his will to ensure that all his assets, including the family home, would pass to his wife, Mrs. Amanda Howard, Gregory stated flatly, sliding a document across the table. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of the legal jargon. "But that's impossible. Michael always said the house would remain mine. Frank built that house for our family." Amanda's face hardened into a mask of cold indifference. "The house is legally mine now, along with everything else Michael owned. The deed was transferred into his name after your husband died, remember? And now it passes to me as his widow." The room seemed to spin around me as the implications sank in. "Are you saying I have to leave my home?" "I'm not just saying it, I'm requiring it," Amanda replied, her voice cutting through my shock like a knife. "I've already listed the property with a real estate agent. They're showing it tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I gasped. "But all my belongings, my memories, my life is in that house." Amanda's eyes narrowed as she leaned across the table. "Don't be dramatic, Lydia. Pack your bags and learn to survive. We all have to move on." Her words hit me like physical blows. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly through the roaring in my ears. "This can't be what Michael wanted," I whispered. Gregory interjected, "The will is quite clear, Mrs. Howard, and legally binding." With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone. "I need to call someone, get some advice." Amanda quickly reached over and plucked the phone from my fingers. "That won't be necessary. This matter is settled." She slid another document toward me. "This is an eviction notice legally requiring you to vacate the premises within 48 hours. 48 hours? I cried. "That's impossible. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my concern," Amanda said coldly. "You're a grown woman. Figure it out." Tears blurred my vision as the full horror of my situation became clear. Michael would never do this to me. Never. For the first time that evening, a small, cruel smile played at the corners of Amanda's mouth. "Michael did a lot of things you never knew about, Lydia. He was tired of supporting you, tired of your emotional neediness. Why do you think he changed his will?" Each word was a dagger to my heart. Could it be true? Had my beloved son secretly resented me all this time? No, I couldn't believe it. This wasn't the Michael I knew, the boy who had always protected me, especially after his father died. "I don't believe you," I said, finding a shred of strength in my conviction. Amanda shrugged. "Believe what you want, but be out of that house by Friday afternoon, or my security team will remove you and whatever belongings you haven't packed." She stood up, signaling that the discussion was over. Gregory will see you out." As the attorney escorted me to the door, I turned back to Amanda, who was already pouring herself a celebratory glass of wine. "How can you do this? We're family." She looked up, her eyes cold and empty. "No, Lydia. You were Michael's family. You are nothing to me." The door closed behind me, and I stood on the steps of the elegant building, my world crumbling around me. The cool night air couldn't alleviate the burning humiliation and despair that consumed me. Somehow I made it to my car, my vision blurred with tears. I sat there for what felt like hours trying to process what had just happened. Finally, I started making frantic calls to friends, family, anyone who might be able to help me or offer temporary shelter. But my brother Robert was traveling abroad, unreachable. My closest friend was caring for her husband, who had recently suffered a stroke. Others made excuses, uncomfortable with the sudden imposition, or perhaps unwilling to get involved in what might become a messy legal battle. By midnight, I returned to the house that had been my home for over 30 years, the house that apparently wasn't mine anymore. I walked through each room, touching familiar surfaces, breathing in the sense of a lifetime of memories. In the morning light, I began the heartbreaking task of deciding what I could take and what I would have to leave behind. Each item I packed was a piece of my heart, a fragment of the life I had built with Frank and Michael. Photo albums, Frank's watch, Michael's childhood drawings, a few pieces of jewelry and clothes that would fit in my sedan. Everything else, including furniture, passed down through generations, would stay. On Friday afternoon, as the 48-hour deadline approached, I made one last desperate call to a legal aid society, only to be told they couldn't help me on such short notice. As I carried my last suitcase to the car, I noticed a black SUV pulling up. Two men in security uniforms stepped out, watching me impassively. My neighbors, curious about the unusual activity, peered from their windows and porches. The shame of being forced from my own home in front of people who had known me for decades was almost unbearable. With a final glance at the house Frank had built with such love and care, I got into my car and drove away, tears streaming down my face, with no idea where I would sleep that night. The security guards followed me to the end of the street, making sure I was truly gone. That night, I parked in the lot of a 24-hour supermarket, reclined my seat as far as it would go, and tried to sleep, surrounded by the few possessions I had managed to save from my former life. At 58 years old, I had become homeless, cast out by the woman my son had trusted and loved, with nowhere to turn and no idea how I would survive. The reality of living in my car hit me hard that first night. I had never imagined I would find myself in such a desperate situation at my age. My 12-year-old sedan, which had seemed perfectly adequate for grocery runs and visits to friends, now became my entire home. The back seat was crammed with hastily packed suitcases and boxes containing the precious fragments of my former life. That first morning, I woke with a stiff neck and an aching back, disoriented, until the events of the previous day came flooding back. The supermarket parking lot was already filling with early shoppers. I quickly sat up, embarrassed at the thought of being recognized by someone who knew me as Lydia Howard, respected retired art teacher, not this homeless woman sleeping in her car. I had been a member of a local fitness center for years, using it a few times a week to swim and take yoga classes. Now it became my lifeline. The monthly membership fee seemed like a worthwhile expense, as it gave me access to showers, clean bathrooms, and a locker where I could store a few toiletries. That first morning, I gathered my small bag of shower essentials and a change of clothes, trying to appear like any other member coming in for an early workout. But inside, I felt like an imposter, afraid someone would notice I was wearing the same clothes from the day before, that my eyes were red and swollen from crying all night. "Good morning, Mrs. Howard," called the young receptionist cheerfully. "Early start today?" I managed a weak smile. "Yes, thought I'd get in before the crowds." After my shower, I looked at myself in the mirror of the locker room. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. In just 24 hours, lines of stress and exhaustion had etched themselves deeper into my face. My silver hair, which I had always kept neatly styled, hung limp around my shoulders. "Pull yourself together," I whispered to my reflection. You can figure this out. But the truth was, I had no idea what to do next. I had a little over $10,000 in savings, but finding an apartment would require first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. And without Michael's monthly support, I wasn't sure how I would sustain myself long term on my modest teacher's pension. When friends called to check on me in the days following Michael's funeral, I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Instead, I fabricated a story about staying with relatives needing some time away from the house with its painful memories. I'm managing, I would say, when asked how I was coping, taking it one day at a time. In reality, I was barely surviving. Each day followed a similar pattern. I would wake up early before the parking lot became busy and head to the gym to freshen up. Then I would spend hours at the public library researching affordable housing options and legal aid resources, or simply sitting in one of the comfortable chairs reading to pass the time until evening. Finding safe places to park overnight became a constant concern. I discovered that hospital parking garages were relatively secure, though the constant comings and goings made sleep difficult. Sometimes I would park on quiet residential streets, setting my alarm to leave before daylight to avoid arousing suspicion. One night, about a week into my homelessness, I parked in what seemed like a safe spot behind a closed restaurant. Around 2 in the morning, I was startled awake by someone trying my car door. Through the window, I could see a man's face peering in at me, illuminated by a distant streetlight. I quickly locked all the doors and started the engine driving away with my heart pounding in my chest. After that terrifying encounter, I became even more careful about where I parked, often driving to different neighborhoods each night, using up precious gas that I could ill afford to waste. The constant vigilance and fear took a heavy toll on my mental and physical health. I lost weight rapidly, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. Meals consisted mainly of granola bars and fruit that didn't require refrigeration. Occasionally, I would treat myself to a small coffee at a local diner just to sit in a warm, safe place for an hour. The waitress there, a middle-aged woman named Donna, began to recognize me after a few visits. "Honey, you look exhausted," she said one morning, sliding an extra piece of toast onto my plate without charging me. "Everything okay?" I nodded, blinking back tears at this small kindness. "Just going through a rough patch." "We all have those," she replied, refilling my coffee cup. "This one's on the house." As the days passed, my savings dwindled at an alarming rate. Even living as frugally as possible, the costs of gas, food, and my gym membership added up. I began looking for jobs, but quickly discovered that my age was a significant barrier. Retail positions went to younger applicants, and teaching jobs required interviews for which I had no appropriate clothing or address to provide. The physical toll of sleeping in my car became increasingly severe. My back pain grew worse, making it difficult to find any comfortable position in the cramped space. I developed dark circles under my eyes from constant sleep deprivation, and the stress caused my hair to thin noticeably. I tried to maintain a routine of personal care, but simple tasks like washing my hair or ironing a blouse became logistical challenges. I kept a small supply of bottled water in the car for brushing my teeth and became adept at changing clothes in the reclined front seat, using a blanket for privacy. After nearly 2 weeks of this existence, I was sitting in the library searching job listings on one of the public computers when I heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Howard, is that you?" I looked up to see Jessica Martinez, one of my former students from about 8 years earlier. She had been a talented art student who had gone on to study design at college. "Jessica," I said quickly, closing the web page showing homeless shelter information. "How nice to see you." She sat down beside me, her face warm with genuine pleasure at our chance meeting. "I've been meaning to reach out to you. I heard about your son, and I'm so sorry for your loss." The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. For 2 weeks I had been maintaining a facade of normalcy, pretending to the world that I was managing my grief with dignity. But Jessica's sincere compassion cracked my carefully constructed veneer. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Jessica looked at me more closely, concern evident in her expression. "Mrs. Howard, forgive me for asking, but are you okay?" You don't look well. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or the fact that Jessica had always been one of my most empathetic students, but I found myself unable to continue the pretense. Actually, no, I admitted, my voice breaking. I'm not okay at all. Jessica listened with growing horror as I explained my situation, her expression shifting from shock to outrage as I described Amanda's actions. That's horrible, she exclaimed when I finished. You can't continue living in your car. It's not safe and you look completely worn out. She thought for a moment. Look, I have a small apartment, just a one-bedroom, but there's a comfortable couch you can sleep on until you figure something out. I was overwhelmed by her offer. Jessica, I couldn't possibly impose. It's not an imposition, she insisted. You were the teacher who encouraged me to apply for art school when everyone else said it wasn't practical. You changed the course of my life. Please let me help you now. That night I slept on Jessica's couch, the first real sleep I'd had in 2 weeks. As I drifted off, I wondered what tomorrow would bring, and how long I could depend on the kindness of a former student before I would need to face my uncertain future once again. Little did I know that the next day would bring an unexpected phone call that would change everything, offering a glimmer of hope when I needed it most. I awoke on Jessica's couch, feeling more rested than I had in weeks. The simple luxury of sleeping on a real piece of furniture in a secure environment without fear of someone trying my car door in the middle of the night was something I would never again take for granted. Jessica had already left for her job at a graphic design firm, but she'd left a note on the coffee table. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Made fresh coffee. Back around 6. Stay as long as you need. Her kindness brought tears to my eyes. In my darkest moment, this young woman whom I had taught so many years ago had become my unexpected guardian angel. After a proper breakfast, a hot shower, and changing into clean clothes, I felt somewhat human again. I was looking through the job listings in the newspaper Jessica had left when my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized. Hello, I answered cautiously. Mrs. Howard, Lydia Howard? A male voice inquired. Yes, speaking. Mrs. Howard, this is Thomas Reynolds, Michael's attorney. My heart skipped a beat. Thomas had been Michael's trusted lawyer and friend for years. I had met him several times at family gatherings and always found him to be kind and professional. Thomas, I said, relief evident in my voice. I tried to reach you after the funeral, but Amanda said you were no longer handling their affairs. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's not accurate, Mrs. Howard. I've been looking for you for the past 2 weeks. Your neighbors said you'd moved out suddenly, and no one seemed to know where you'd gone. It's a long story, I said, my voice wavering. I believe I can guess some of it. Thomas replied, his tone grim. Mrs. Howard, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. It's regarding Michael's estate, and it's extremely important. We arranged to meet at his office downtown in 2 hours. After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. What could be so urgent that Thomas had been searching for me? Had Amanda lied about the will? Was there some legal technicality that might help me reclaim my home? I tried not to let hope rise too quickly, afraid of another crushing disappointment. But as I took the bus downtown, I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark ignite within me. Thomas Reynolds's office was located in a prestigious building in the financial district. As I entered the sleek, modern reception area, I felt acutely aware of my appearance. Despite my best efforts to look presentable, 2 weeks of living in my car had left their mark. My clothes were wrinkled from being packed in suitcases, and no amount of brushing could restore my hair to its former state. Mrs. Howard, the receptionist greeted me warmly. Mr. Reynolds is expecting you. Please go right in. Thomas rose from behind his desk as I entered his office. He was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. His face registered shock at my appearance, but he quickly masked it with a professional smile. Lydia, he said, using my first name as he'd been invited to do years ago at Michael's birthday dinner. Thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit down. Once I was seated, Thomas studied me with concern. I don't mean to be forward, but you look like you've been through quite an ordeal. The simple acknowledgement of my suffering broke something inside me. To my mortification, I began to cry, tears I had been holding back for weeks finally spilling over. "I'm sorry," I managed between sobs. "It's been difficult." Thomas pushed a box of tissues toward me and waited patiently until I had composed myself. Then gently he asked, "Can you tell me what's happened since Michael's passing?" I took a deep breath and recounted everything from Amanda's coldness after the funeral to the shocking dinner where I was given 48 hours to leave my home. I told him about living in my car, about my dwindling resources, and about Jessica's kindness. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and removed his glasses. "Lydia," he said slowly, "I need to show you something." He opened a drawer and withdrew a folder, placing it on the desk between us. "This is the real trust document Michael created 3 months before his death with my assistance." My heart pounded as Thomas continued. "Michael came to me with concerns about Amanda. Their marriage had been troubled for some time, though he kept it private. He suspected she was mainly interested in his money and was possibly having an affair." I gasped. I had no idea. "Michael was a private person," Thomas said. "He didn't want to worry you, but he was determined to protect both you and his assets." He opened the folder and turned several documents toward me. "This trust, worth approximately $8 million, names you as the primary beneficiary. It includes provisions for your housing, medical care, and ongoing living expenses for the rest of your life." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was hearing. "But the will Amanda showed me was likely falsified or signed under duress," Thomas finished grimly. "Michael had expressed concerns that Amanda was pressuring him to change his will. He came to me shortly before his death, worried that she might have tricked him into signing something." He reached into another drawer and pulled out a small USB drive. "Michael also left this with me. He said if anything happened to him, I should show it to you." Thomas connected the drive to his computer and turned the screen so I could see. A video began playing, and there was Michael sitting in what appeared to be this very office. My heart clenched at seeing him alive, his familiar gestures and expressions so painfully absent from my life now. "Mom," Michael began, looking directly into the camera, "if you're watching this, something has happened to me. I hope you never have to see this video, but I need to make sure you're protected." Tears streamed down my face as Michael continued. "I've created this trust for you with Thomas's help. Amanda doesn't know about it. Our marriage hasn't been what I thought it would be." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "She's changed, or maybe I just didn't see who she really was. Either way, I've become concerned about her intentions." He leaned closer to the camera. "If something happens to me, Amanda may try to take everything, including the house Dad built. Don't let her. Thomas has all the legal documentation to protect you and your home. I've made sure of it." Michael's eyes softened. "I love you, Mom. You've always been there for me, and I want to make sure you're taken care of no matter what." The video ended, and I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything I'd just learned. My son had suspected Amanda's true nature, and had taken steps to protect me. Even from beyond the grave, he was looking out for me. "There's more," Thomas said quietly. "Michael also left recordings of conversations with Amanda that suggest she was manipulating him financially and emotionally. In one particularly damning recording, she admits to an affair with his business partner, James Keating." He slid another document across the desk. "This is the original will Michael created and signed in my presence, leaving the family home to you for your lifetime, with provisions for its maintenance and upkeep." Hope, a feeling I had almost forgotten, began to bloom in my chest. "What does all this mean, Thomas?" "It means," he said, a small, determined smile appearing on his face, "that we have an extremely strong case to contest the will Amanda presented. The trust is ironclad, completely separate from the estate Amanda is trying to claim. It was specifically designed to be protected from any claims she might make." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "So I could get my home back?" Not only your home, Thomas replied, but financial security for the rest of your life exactly as Michael intended. What do we do now? I asked, a new determination replacing my despair. First, Thomas said, reaching for his phone, we get you proper accommodation immediately. The trust has a provision for emergency housing needs. He made a quick call to his assistant, arranging for a hotel room until more permanent arrangements could be made. Then, he continued after hanging up, with your permission, I'd like to engage Patterson and Monroe, one of the best estate litigation firms in the city, to represent you. Michael left specific instructions and funds for this possibility. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Michael hadn't abandoned me after all. Even in death, he was still my protector, my beloved son, who had foreseen this nightmare and prepared for it. There's one more thing you should know, Thomas said, his expression serious. This will likely become a difficult legal battle. Amanda won't give up easily, especially once she learns about the trust. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the past 2 weeks, about sleeping in my car, about the humiliation and fear I had endured. I thought about Frank, who had built our family home with his own hands, and about Michael, who had gone to such lengths to protect his mother. Yes, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'm ready to fight for what Michael wanted me to have. Thomas nodded approval in his eyes. Then let's begin. As I left his office that afternoon, heading to the hotel he had arranged, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Michael's death. Purpose. The grief was still there, a constant companion, but now it was joined by a steely resolve. Amanda had picked the wrong woman to bully and discard. With Michael's foresight and Thomas's help, I would reclaim not just my home, but my dignity and security. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in weeks, I could see a path forward. My son's last gift to me was the means to fight back, and I intended to honor his memory by doing exactly that. The transformation from homeless widow to legal warrior began immediately. Thomas Reynolds was as good as his word, engaging the prestigious firm of Patterson and Monroe that very day. By evening, I was settled in a comfortable hotel suite with new clothes being delivered and a team of legal experts already reviewing my case. Emily Patterson, the formidable lead attorney assigned to me, wasted no time in outlining our strategy. The first step, she explained during our initial meeting, is to file an emergency petition to freeze all assets of the estate until the will contest is resolved. This will prevent Amanda from selling the house or liquidating any other significant assets. I nodded, trying to absorb the legal terminology that now dominated my life. How quickly can we do that? The paperwork is already being prepared, Emily replied. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning and request an emergency hearing. The evidence Thomas has provided, particularly Michael's video statement, gives us strong grounds for immediate action. True to her word, Emily and her team moved with remarkable efficiency. By the following afternoon, we were in court, facing a stern judge and a clearly shocked Amanda, who had not expected such a swift counterattack. I will never forget the look on Amanda's face when she saw me enter the courtroom with my legal team. Gone was the homeless woman in wrinkled clothes. In her place stood a grieving mother, determined to honor her son's true wishes. I had chosen to wear the pearl necklace Frank had given me, drawing strength from the memories of both my husband and son. Amanda was accompanied by Gregory Hoffman, the attorney who had delivered the eviction notice, and 2 other lawyers I didn't recognize. She glared at me with undisguised contempt, leaning over to whisper something to Gregory that made him frown and shake his head. Judge Wilson, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the emergency hearing to order. Emily presented our case with surgical precision, explaining how I had been evicted from my family home based on a will that we had significant reason to believe was either falsified or signed under duress. Your Honor, Emily said, placing Michael's video statement into evidence, the deceased not only created a separate trust for his mother's benefit, but explicitly recorded his concerns about his wife's intentions. When the video was played in court, I could barely watch, still finding it too painful to see Michael alive and speaking. Instead, I watched Amanda's face, which cycled through shock, anger, and calculation as her husband's words filled the courtroom. Gregory Hoffman immediately objected, claiming the video had no legal standing and could have been recorded under duress or edited to misrepresent Michael's intentions. Judge Wilson overruled him. The video will be admitted as evidence to be evaluated during the full hearing. For now, it presents sufficient cause for concern regarding the contested will. Emily then presented the trust documents, explaining that regardless of the will's validity, the trust was a separate legal entity that Amanda had no right to contest. Furthermore, Your Honor, Emily continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Howard, the petitioner, was forced into homelessness as a result of the respondent's actions, living in her car for 2 weeks before finding temporary shelter with a former student. A murmur ran through the courtroom at this revelation. I felt a flush of embarrassment, but held my head high, refusing to be shamed for what Amanda had done to me. Judge Wilson turned her penetrating gaze to Amanda. Mrs. Howard, she addressed Amanda, creating momentary confusion until she clarified, the younger Mrs. Howard, is this true? Did you evict your mother-in-law from her home of 30 years within 48 hours of informing her of the will's contents? Amanda leaned toward her attorney, who whispered something before she answered. Your Honor, I was simply executing the terms of my husband's will. The house legally belongs to me, and I needed to prepare it for sale. Within 48 hours of informing a grieving mother that her son had disinherited her, Judge Wilson's tone made it clear what she thought of this action. Gregory Hoffman intervened. Your Honor, my client was well within her legal rights. The timing, while perhaps unfortunate, does not affect the validity of the will. Judge Wilson studied both parties for a long moment. Based on the evidence presented, I am issuing a temporary injunction, freezing all assets of the estate until a full hearing can be conducted. Additionally, she continued, looking directly at Amanda, I am ordering that the petitioner Lydia Howard be granted immediate access to the family home which she may occupy pending the resolution of this case. Amanda stood up abruptly. You can't do that. It's my house. Sit down, Mrs. Howard, Judge Wilson said sharply. I can, and I have. If you have disposed of any of the petitioner's personal belongings, you will be held accountable. Court officers will accompany Mrs. Howard Sr. to the property this afternoon to ensure compliance. As we left the courthouse, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the case waited outside. Emily skillfully guided me past them with a brief statement. This is a private family matter involving a son's wish to protect his mother. We are confident that justice will prevail. Amanda pushed through the crowd moments later, her face contorted with fury. She spotted me and pointed an accusing finger. This isn't over, Lydia. You'll regret this. Emily placed a protective hand on my shoulder. Don't respond, she murmured. Let her show her true colors to the world. That afternoon, accompanied by 2 court officers, and Emily, I returned to my home. Amanda had already left, but the evidence of her hasty occupation was everywhere. She had begun repainting walls, removing family photos, and replacing furniture. Most painfully, I discovered she had thrown out boxes of Michael's childhood mementos that I had carefully preserved in the attic. We'll add destruction of personal property to our claims, Emily noted, taking photographs of the disarray. As the officers and Emily conducted their inventory, I stood in Michael's childhood bedroom, which Amanda had already begun to convert into a home gym. Running my hand along the wall where his height had been marked year after year, I silently promised my son that I would fight with everything I had to preserve his legacy and his wishes. That night, sleeping in my own bed for the first time in weeks, I felt Michael's presence strongly. I'm home, sweetheart, I whispered into the darkness. And I'm not leaving again. The next morning, the real battle began. Amanda filed an immediate counter-petition claiming that the trust documents were forgeries and that Michael had confided in her his desire to sell the family home and cut financial ties with his financially irresponsible mother. Emily was unfazed by these claims. This is just the beginning, she warned me. Amanda is going to try every trick in the book. But we have something she doesn't, the truth. Over the following weeks, the case began to attract media attention. The story of a widow forced into homelessness by her daughter-in-law, only to discover a secret trust left by her son, had all the elements of a compelling human drama. While Emily worked to keep the most sensitive details private, the public narrative quickly turned in my favor. Former students, colleagues from my teaching days, and neighbors all came forward with stories about my character and my close relationship with Michael, directly contradicting Amanda's claims that we had been estranged. Perhaps most damaging to Amanda's case was the emergence of evidence about her affair with James Keating, Michael's business partner. An anonymous envelope delivered to Emily's office contained photographs of Amanda and James together in intimate situations with timestamps indicating the affair had begun well before Michael's death. This significantly strengthens our claim that Amanda may have had motivation to manipulate Michael or falsify documents, Emily explained, carefully storing the photographs as evidence. The turning point came 6 weeks into the legal proceedings when James Keating himself contacted Thomas Reynolds. "He wants to make a deal," Thomas informed me during a strategy meeting. Apparently, Amanda promised him a significant share of Michael's business assets if he supported her version of events. But now that the affair has been exposed, he's worried about his own legal liability if he perjures himself. Emily leaned forward, her expression intense. "What exactly is he offering?" "Testimony," Thomas replied. "He claims he overheard Amanda pressuring Michael to change his will 3 weeks before the accident. According to Keating, Michael was resistant, but eventually signed something after Amanda threatened to publicly expose some alleged financial irregularities in his business." "Were there irregularities?" I asked, concerned about my son's reputation. Thomas shook his head. "Keating says no, it was a bluff on Amanda's part. But Michael was extremely protective of his business reputation and might have signed something to prevent a public scandal even if the allegations were false." This new evidence proved to be the tipping point. When Amanda learned that James was preparing to testify against her, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. During her deposition, when confronted with the evidence of her affair and James's potential testimony, she lost her composure entirely. "So what if I was seeing James?" she snapped. "Michael was always working, always calling his precious mother. He never had time for me." Emily pounced on this outburst. "Did you pressure your husband to change his will shortly before his death?" "Mrs. Howard." Amanda glared across the table. "Michael knew his mother was financially irresponsible. He wanted to protect our future." "That's not what I asked," Emily persisted. "Did you pressure him to change his will?" After a whispered conference with her attorney, Amanda invoked her right to end the deposition, but the damage was done. Her mask of the grieving widow had slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. The final confrontation occurred in Judge Wilson's courtroom 3 months after I had been evicted from my home. By then, I had regained my strength both physically and emotionally. With proper nutrition, rest, and the support of friends like Jessica and the legal team Michael had provided, I was no longer the broken woman who had slept in her car. Judge Wilson had reviewed all the evidence, including Michael's video statement, the trust documents, the testimony from James Keating, and expert analysis of the contested will. Her ruling was unequivocal. This court finds clear and convincing evidence that the will presented by Amanda Howard was signed under duress and does not represent the true intentions of the deceased, Judge Wilson stated. The original will leaving the family home to Lydia Howard with provisions for its maintenance is hereby reinstated as valid. I closed my eyes in relief as she continued. Furthermore, the trust established by Michael Howard for his mother's benefit is declared valid and legally binding. All assets of said trust shall remain under the administration of Thomas Reynolds as trustee per the deceased's explicit instructions. Judge Wilson turned her stern gaze to Amanda. The court finds the actions of Amanda Howard in evicting her mother-in-law from her home of 30 years to be unconscionable and potentially criminally negligent. A referral will be made to the district attorney's office for consideration of elder abuse charges. Amanda's face drained of color. Her attorney quickly requested a sidebar leading to intense whispered negotiations. Eventually an agreement was reached. Amanda would relinquish all claims to Michael's estate beyond what was specified in the prenuptial agreement they had signed, which I hadn't even known existed, in exchange for the court not pursuing criminal charges. As we left the courtroom victorious, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Joy at having my home and security restored, vindication of Michael's true wishes, but also lingering grief for my son, whose absence remained a constant ache in my heart. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked down the courthouse steps. "Michael would be proud of you, Lydia. You fought for what was right just as he tried to do." I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. My son had protected me even after his death, his foresight and love reaching beyond the grave to ensure his mother would never be vulnerable or homeless again. As I unlocked the front door of my family home, truly mine once again, I felt both victory and deep sorrow. The legal battle was over. Amanda had retreated to her life of luxury with a fraction of what she had hoped to gain, but Michael was still gone. No legal victory could bring back my son. The house felt different as I walked through it that day. Amanda had made changes during her brief occupation, painting over the warm colors Frank and I had chosen, replacing family photos with generic artwork, and rearranging furniture to erase our family's imprint. The most painful discovery was in the attic, where boxes of Michael's childhood mementos, carefully preserved for decades, had been callously discarded. "She threw away his science fair ribbons," I whispered to Jessica, who had come to help me settle back in. "And the clay handprint he made in first grade. How could anyone be so cruel?" Jessica put her arm around my shoulders. "We'll rebuild, Mrs. Howard. We can make new memories to fill this space." Over the next few weeks, with the help of friends, former colleagues, and students who had rallied around me, I reclaimed my home. Walls were repainted in the colors Frank had chosen years ago. Furniture was returned to its rightful places, and new family photos were framed to replace those Amanda had removed. The $8 million trust Michael had established provided more financial security than I had ever imagined. Thomas Reynolds, as trustee, ensured that all my needs were met, from home maintenance to health care, while protecting the principal for long-term stability. Michael was very specific about how he wanted the trust managed, Thomas explained during one of our meetings. "He wanted you to be comfortable, but also to use some of the funds for causes you believe in." This last wish of Michael's became the seed for what would become the Michael Howard Foundation for Elder Security. With Thomas's guidance, I established a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping senior citizens facing housing insecurity and potential homelessness, particularly those who, like me, had been victims of financial exploitation. The foundation provided emergency housing assistance, legal aid, and advocacy for vulnerable seniors. My own experience of sleeping in my car, of the shame and fear that accompanied sudden homelessness, informed every aspect of the foundation's work. What had been the darkest chapter of my life became the catalyst for helping others avoid similar suffering. Jessica, whose kindness had been my lifeline in those desperate days, became the foundation's first employee. Her design skills and compassionate nature made her the perfect person to create materials that would reach seniors in need while preserving their dignity. "I never expected to find purpose in tragedy," I told her one day as we reviewed applications for emergency housing grants, "but helping others through their darkest times has somehow helped me through mine." 6 months after the court's decision, I received an unexpected letter from James Keating, Michael's former business partner and Amanda's lover. "I know no apology can make up for my part in what happened," he wrote, "but I want you to know that Michael spoke of you with nothing but love and respect. He was creating that trust for you long before he suspected anything about Amanda and me. It wasn't a last-minute decision born of suspicion, but a long-planned act of love from a son who wanted to ensure his mother would always be secure." Those words brought both tears and comfort. Michael had always been a planner, just like his father. The thought that he had been working to protect me long before any hint of trouble with Amanda felt like one last gift from my son. Amanda eventually moved to Florida with what remained of her divorce settlement. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had quickly remarried, this time to an older, wealthy real estate developer. I felt no satisfaction in knowing she had simply moved on to a new target, only relief that she was out of my life for good. My journey from comfortable retirement to homeless widow to advocate had transformed me in ways I never could have imagined. The pain of losing Michael would never fully heal, but the work of the foundation gave meaning to my loss and honored his memory in tangible ways. On the first anniversary of Michael's death, I sat in the garden Frank had planted decades ago, now rejuvenated with new roses and Michael's favorite sunflowers. I felt the presence of both my husband and son, not as ghosts or supernatural visitations, but as the enduring influence their love had on my life. Life can change in an instant, I said aloud to the garden, to Frank and Michael, to myself. But so can we. That simple truth had become my mantra, the lesson I shared with the seniors who came to the foundation for help. No matter how devastating the loss, how complete the betrayal, how desperate the circumstances change, is always possible. Not just circumstances changing for better or worse, but ourselves changing, growing stronger through adversity, finding resilience we never knew we possessed. When I look back now at the woman who drove away from her home with nowhere to go, sleeping in parking lots and washing in gym showers, I barely recognize her. Not because she was weak, that frightened, grief-stricken mother who had lost everything, but because she had not yet discovered her own strength. That strength was always within me, just as it is within all of us, waiting for the moment when it is most needed. It was in me when Frank died, and I had to learn to live alone. It was in me when I faced Amanda across the courtroom, refusing to be shamed for my homelessness. It was in me each time I shared my story with a senior in crisis, offering not just financial help, but the understanding that comes only from having walked the same painful path. Michael's final gift was not just financial security, but the opportunity to discover what I was truly capable of. In protecting me, he had also empowered me. In his absence, I had found a new purpose that honored his memory every day. Have you ever faced a moment when everything you thought was secure suddenly vanished? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Please share your stories in the comments below, as they might give someone else the courage they need today. If this story touched you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience, and like and share to help others who might be facing their own unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, no matter how dark the moment, there is always a path forward, even if we cannot yet see it.